In a quiet town called Brooksville, life moved at a calm pace. People knew each other by name and everyone had their place in the small community. There were local shops, a few schools, and a city hall where decisions were made for the people who lived there. The town wasn't perfect, but it was peaceful most days. Officer Marcus Daly was one of the cops who patrolled the streets. He was known for being serious and not easily impressed. He believed in rules and doing things by the book. Some people respected him for that, while others thought he was too strict. Either way, he took his job seriously and didn't like when things went wrong. On the other side of town lived Tanya Whitmore. She was kind, smart, and always helping people. Her husband, James Whitmore, was the mayor, the man in charge of making sure the town ran smoothly. Tanya didn't have a government job like her husband, but she did important work too. She ran a program that helped young people stay out of trouble and reach for better futures. Everyone liked her because she listened and cared about what happened to others. Tanya also loved her hair. She took pride in how she looked, especially since she often spoke at events or gave interviews on TV. That week, she had a big fundraiser coming up for her youth group. It was going to be a big night with speeches, music, and people from all over the town. She wanted to look her best. So on a rainy Tuesday afternoon, she walked into her favorite salon near the main street. The sky was gray and drops of rain tapped against the windows as she sat down in the chair. The stylist smiled and asked how she wanted it done today. "Just a light touch-up," Tanya said, brushing a hand through her braided style. "I've got something important this weekend." As the stylist worked, Tanya checked her phone. Messages came in from volunteers, updates from the event team, and a reminder from her husband to pick up some snacks for dinner later. She smiled, thinking about how busy they both were but still tried to make time for each other. Outside, Officer Daly was driving his patrol car. The radio buzzed with updates from dispatch. One message caught his attention. A woman named Tanisha Wallace had an active warrant for a drug-related offense. She was described as a black female with braids. That was it. No photo, no specific details. Daly frowned. He'd seen a lot in his years on the force, and sometimes people tried to trick officers or run away. He figured the faster he handled it, the better. He drove around looking for anyone matching the description. Then, just a few blocks from the salon, he saw a black woman walking out of a shop. She had braids. Without thinking much more, he pulled. Tanya stepped out into the drizzle, holding her umbrella. She felt good after her hair was done and couldn't wait to get home. But before she could walk far, a voice called out, "Ma'am, I need you to stop right there." She turned and saw a police officer walking toward her. She recognized the uniform, but not the face. "Is there a problem, officer?" she asked politely. "I believe you're under arrest," he said. Tanya blinked. "Under arrest? For what?" "Outstanding warrant," he replied. "Tanisha Wallace?" "That's not me," she said, shaking her head. "I'm Tanya Whitmore, the mayor's wife." Daly hesitated for just a second, but not long enough to change his mind. "That's what they all say," he muttered. Tanya folded her arms. "Look, I understand your job, but you got the wrong person. Let's go to the station if you need to check my ID, but I can't do this right now. I have plans tonight." The officer reached for his cuffs. "You need to come with me now." Tanya stepped back. "No, I don't. You can't just take someone without proof. This is not how this works." Things started to escalate. A few people nearby stopped walking and watched. One man pulled out his phone, curious. Another woman stepped inside a store, not wanting to get involved. Daly grabbed her arm gently but firmly. "Please cooperate." Tanya shook her head again. "You're making a mistake." Before she could say more, Daly reached into his bag and pulled out a utility razor, the kind used for cutting tape or rope. What he did next shocked everyone watching. He grabbed a section of her braided hair and cut it off, fast and rough. Tanya gasped and pulled away. "What are you doing? Stop!" People started murmuring. Someone shouted, "Hey, leave her alone!" But Daly kept going. He didn't care about the noise anymore. In his mind, he was removing evidence, maybe even changing her appearance so she wouldn't try to escape later. To him, it seemed like the logical thing to do. When he finished, Tanya touched the side of her head where her hair used to be. Her eyes filled with tears, not just from pain, but from shock and humiliation. "This isn't right," she whispered. Then, without another word, Daly cuffed her and led her to his car. Across the street, the man who had been recording everything lowered his phone. He stared at the screen, unsure what to do next. He knew what he had just filmed was serious. Later that night, the video began to spread online. At first, it was just shared among friends. Then it hit social media. Within hours, hundreds of people were watching the clip. By morning, it was everywhere. People were furious. How could a cop treat someone like that? And not just anyone, the mayor's wife? Brooksville woke up to a new kind of day, one full of anger, confusion, and questions. And none of it would be forgotten soon. The next morning, Brooksville was not the same quiet town it had always been. Phones buzzed nonstop. People talked in loud voices at coffee shops and bus stops. The video was everywhere, on phones, tablets, TV news, even printed out and taped. To store windows. It showed everything. Tanya shocked, her hair cut off, the officer dragging her away like she was some kind of criminal. At City Hall, Mayor James Whitmore sat at his desk with his head in his hands. He had seen the video already. His wife, the woman he loved, who helped kids, who stood for peace, had been treated like this by someone who was supposed to protect people. He could barely breathe when he saw how she looked afterward. Touching, her head, eyes full of hurt. He called an emergency meeting with city officials and the police chief. Everyone was worried. They had never seen anything like this before. Some said the officer had gone too far. Others said he was just doing his job, but no one could deny the damage that was done. Outside, things were getting worse. By noon, a group of people began to gather in front of the police station. Then more came. Some held signs. Others shouted. They wanted answers. They wanted justice. A local reporter from the town's small but trusted news channel arrived with a camera crew. She interviewed protesters, teachers, parents, and even kids from the youth center that Tanya helped run. One teen said, "She gave me a second chance." "And they did that to her?" Another man asked. "If a cop can do this to the mayor's wife, what would he do to someone without power?" By the end of the day, the protest had grown. Local leaders started to speak up. One church opened its doors for a community meeting. Teachers canceled lessons so students could talk about what they saw. In every corner of Brooksville, people were asking the same question: how could this happen? Inside the police department, Officer Daly sat alone in a small room. He stared at the wall, trying to make sense of it all. He had watched the video, too. He didn't think it would go this far. To him, it had seemed like a simple arrest. But now everyone saw it differently. His commanding officer came in and told him he was being put on leave. That meant he couldn't work until everything was sorted out. Daly tried to argue. "I was doing my job," he said. "I thought she was someone else." "That doesn't matter," the officer replied. "You disrespected someone in front of the whole town. You made a mistake and now we have to fix it." That night, Tanya sat at home with her husband. Her head was wrapped in a soft scarf, but she still felt the loss of her hair like a weight on her chest. She hadn't slept much. She kept seeing the look on people's faces as it happened. She kept hearing the sound of the razor cutting through her braids. James held her hand. "You don't have to talk about it if you don't want to," he said gently. Tanya took a deep breath. "No," she said. "This isn't just about me anymore." She decided to speak publicly. She didn't want pity. She wanted change. The next morning, she stood in front of a crowd at the town square. Cameras rolled. People listened. She told them what happened, calmly and clearly. She didn't shout. She didn't cry. She just spoke the truth. "I am not perfect," she said, "but I am not a criminal. What happened to me should never happen to anyone. If this is how a woman who is married to the mayor is treated, imagine how others feel every day." Her words hit hard. Later that week, the real Tanisha Wallace was found and arrested peacefully. There was no need for violence, no need to hurt anyone. It proved that the situation with Tanya could have been handled very differently. As the days passed, the pressure on the town grew. National news picked up the story. Bloggers wrote about it. More protests started in other towns inspired by what happened in Brooksville. Mayor Whitmore knew he had to act. He announced new rules for the police force. He called for better training, more oversight, and stricter rules on how officers should handle arrests. He also promised to create a review board made of regular citizens, so people could trust the system again. Officer Daly was officially charged with misconduct and excessive force. The city opened a formal investigation. Whether or not he would be fired, or even face jail time, was still unknown. But for now, he was removed from duty. People started calling the event the haircut heard round the town. It became a symbol of something bigger than just one mistake. It became a moment when people realized that something needed to change. Back at home, Tanya looked in the mirror. Her hair was shorter now, uneven in places where the razor had torn through, but she didn't see shame. She saw strength. She touched the side of her head and whispered, "This is not the end." And she was right. Because sometimes, a single moment can start a movement, and in Brooksville, that moment had already begun. The town of Brooksville was still buzzing with talk. The haircut incident had become more than just a story. It was now part of something bigger, a moment that changed how people saw their own community. Tanya Whitmore became a symbol of courage. She didn't ask for it, but she carried it with grace. People reached out from other towns sharing their own stories of unfair treatment by police. Some were older, some were young, but all had felt powerless at one time or another. Tanya started getting calls from radio shows and TV stations outside of Brooksville. Reporters wanted to know what happened, how she felt, and what should be done next. At first, she wasn't sure if she could speak about it again, but every time she thought about staying quiet, she remembered how it felt when her hair was cut off. Not just the pain, but the shame. So she kept speaking. At the same time, Mayor James Whitmore worked hard to fix things in Brooksville. He met with city leaders, school officials, and even kids from the youth center his wife helped run. He listened more than he talked. And slowly he began to understand what many people had been saying for years. He created a new task force focused on making sure police officers treated everyone fairly. He asked teachers to include lessons about respect, fairness, and history in their classes. He even invited Tanya to help design a new program that would teach young people how to interact with the police in a safe and respectful way. But not everyone was happy. Some people in the town didn't like how much attention the story was getting. They said Officer Daly was just doing his job. They believed he made a mistake, but not a crime. Others thought Tanya was using the situation to gain power or influence. A few even left angry messages online or called her home late at night. Still, most people stood behind her. At the police station, big changes were happening. The chief held meetings every week now. Officers were trained on how to control their emotions, how to treat people with dignity, and how to avoid mistakes like the one Daly had made. A new rule was added. No officer could make an arrest without double-checking the person's identity. Photos, names, and details had to be confirmed before any action was taken. This was partly because of Tanya, because she had been mistaken for someone else. Officer Marcus Daly, meanwhile, sat quietly at home. His badge was gone. His uniform hung in a closet, untouched. Every day he watched the news and heard his name spoken like it belonged to someone else. He tried to explain himself to his wife one night. "I didn't mean to hurt her," he said. "I thought I was doing the right thing." His wife looked at him carefully. "But you didn't listen to her," she said softly. "You didn't believe her when she told you who she was." Daly had no answer. His trial date was set. He would have to go to court and face what he did. Lawyers were already preparing arguments. One side said he had overstepped his power. The other said he was only trying to do his job. Either way, the whole town would be watching. As the days passed, more videos came out. Not just the one from the street, but others too. There was footage from inside the salon, showing Tanya calmly, walking out after her appointment. There was also video from inside the patrol car, where she sat quietly after being arrested, her hand never leaving the side of her head. People started talking more about how important video evidence was. Some schools even used the clips to teach students about civil rights and personal safety. Tanya kept going to meetings and giving talks. She spoke at churches, at high schools, even at a university nearby. Each time she said the same thing: we all deserve to be seen. We all deserve to be heard. And we all deserve to feel safe, and especially when we're doing nothing wrong. One student asked her, "Doesn't it hurt to keep talking about it?" She smiled gently. "Yes," she said. "But if I don't talk, who will? If I don't share my story, how will anyone learn from it?" The student nodded. Back at City Hall, the mayor signed a new law that gave citizens the right to file complaints directly against police officers. He also created a new position, a civilian review board, so regular people could help decide if a cop had broken the rules. It was a small step, but it was a start. Meanwhile, the protests in front of the police station continued. But they weren't full of anger anymore. They were full of hope. People sang songs, shared food, and handed out flyers with tips on how to stay safe during police encounters. On social media, hashtags like "Justice for Tanya" and "Walwarn Hair and Dignity" started trending. People posted pictures of themselves wearing scarves or hats in support. Some even shaved their heads to show they understood what she had gone through. Tanya saw all of this and smiled, though sometimes her eyes still showed sadness. Then, one morning, she got a letter in the mail. It was from a woman named Tanisha Wallace, the real woman who had the warrant. In the letter, Tanisha wrote, "Dear Mrs. Whitmore, I don't know if you'll read this, but I just want to say I'm sorry. I didn't know what happened until I saw the video. I can't imagine how it felt to be treated like that. I've had bad experiences with cops before, but seeing what happened to you, it broke my heart. Thank you for speaking up. Maybe now, people will start listening." Tanya folded the letter and held it close. That night, she sat with her husband on the porch. The sky was clear, stars blinking above them. She touched the scarf on her head and whispered, "This isn't over yet." James nodded. "No," he said, "but we're moving forward." And in Brooksville, that was exactly what was happening. Forward. Not back to how things were, but toward something better. The day of the trial arrived like a storm no one could stop. The small courtroom was packed with people who had come to see what many believed would be a turning point for Brooksville. Reporters stood outside with cameras ready. Some townspeople waited patiently on benches inside, whispering about what might happen next. Tanya Whitmore sat near the front, calm but nervous. She wore a soft headscarf that matched her dress. Around her were friends, community leaders, and even a few students from the youth center she supported. They all knew this wasn't just about one officer or one haircut. It was about fairness, about respect, about change. Officer Marcus Daly entered the room looking older than he had before. His uniform was gone. He wore a plain suit, and his face showed how much the past weeks had changed him. He looked at Tanya once, then quickly away. He didn't seem angry, just tired. The judge came in, and the room grew quiet. The trial began. One by one, witnesses took the stand. The man who recorded the video shared it again with the court. Everyone watched in silence as they saw Officer Daly grab Tanya's hair, cut it off, and arrest her without clear cause. Then it was Daly's turn to speak. He told the court he thought he was doing the right thing. He said he believed Tanya was resisting arrest. He admitted he should have checked more carefully before acting. But he also said he feared she might run or fight back. When asked why he used the razor, he said, "I thought I was removing evidence." The courtroom buzzed with whispers. Then Tanya stood up. She spoke clearly, not loud, but strong. She told them how shocked she felt when a stranger grabbed her hair, how embarrassed she was when people saw her after, how hard it had been to trust. The police after that moment. I didn't do anything wrong, she said. I was walking out of a salon. I was helping kids, I was getting ready to speak at an event, and still I was treated like a criminal. Her words stayed in the air long after she finished. Outside the courthouse, the town listened. Schools paused during lunch to talk about what was happening. Parents turned on the radio while driving. People gathered at cafes to watch live updates. This was no longer just a trial. It had become part of a bigger conversation. After hours of discussion, the jury went into a room to decide. They came back the next morning. The judge called everyone to attention. The foreperson read the decision. Guilty. Officer Daly was found. Guilty of excessive force and misuse of authority. He was stripped of his job permanently. He was also ordered to pay part of the costs related to the trial and some money to Tanya as part of the ruling. When the verdict was announced, there was no cheering. There was no anger. There was only silence for a moment. The kind of silence that comes after a long journey finally ends. Tanya closed her eyes and breathed deeply, not because she was happy someone had lost his job, but because justice had been done. Daly left the courtroom quietly. That night, the town was peaceful. People talked about the ruling. Some said it was fair. Others said it was too harsh. But most agreed something important had happened. Mayor James Whitmore gave a short speech later that evening. "This was not just about my wife," he said. "It was about all of us. If we can't feel safe in our own town, then we must ask ourselves why. Today, we take a step forward. Let this be a lesson to treat each other with care, with honesty, and with dignity." The next few weeks brought more changes. The new Civilian Review Board held its first meeting. Regular people, teachers, shop owners, parents, and even a librarian now had a say in how the police did their jobs. They reviewed cases, looked at complaints, and made sure officers followed the rules. Tanya helped start a new program called Hair and Dignity. It offered support to people who had been mistreated by the system. Victims could get legal help, counseling, and a chance to share their stories. Many came forward saying they finally felt heard. Schools added lessons about civil rights and police interaction to their curriculum. Students learned how to stay safe if they ever had to deal with an officer. Teachers used the story of what happened to Tanya as a real-life example of how things could go wrong and how they could be fixed. At the police station, training sessions became longer and more serious. Officers were taught how to de-escalate situations, how to listen better, and how to avoid making snap decisions based on fear or assumptions. Some officers welcomed the changes. Others grumbled, but followed the rules anyway. Back at home, Daly sat alone in a small apartment he had, rented under a different name. He rarely spoke to anyone. His phone didn't ring much anymore. He watched the news sometimes, but mostly he stayed quiet. Late one night, he wrote a letter. "Dear Mrs. Whitmore, I don't expect you to read this, and I understand if you never forgive me. I've replayed that day over and over in my mind. I thought I was protecting the law, but I realize now that I broke something far more important, trust. I hope you continue your good work. You deserve peace." He never mailed it. But somewhere deep down, he hoped she knew. Back in Brooksville, life slowly returned to normal, but not the same old normal. People walked taller now, spoke louder, felt braver, because they had seen what happened when one person stood up and said, "This isn't right," and they had seen what happened when others listened. Time passed slowly but surely in Brooksville. The haircut incident had changed everything, and even months later, its effects were still being felt. Tanya Whitmore continued her work with the Hair and Dignity Foundation. More people reached out every week. Some were like her, wrongly treated by police. Others were students who wanted to help. Some were parents who feared for their children's safety. She held meetings at schools, community centers, and churches. She shared her story not to blame or shame, but to teach. She talked about respect, fairness, and the importance of standing up when something is wrong. People began to notice how strong she was. Not because she never felt pain, but because she kept going anyway. Mayor James Whitmore kept pushing for change too. He made sure new laws were followed. He checked in on the Civilian Review Board. He visited schools and listened to what kids had to say. He even started leading town meetings where anyone could speak, really speak, without fear. Brooksville slowly became known as a place that cared. Other towns sent letters asking how they could make similar changes. Reporters came to write stories about the town that turned pain into progress. But not everything was easy. There were still some people who didn't agree with what had happened. A few officers left the force saying the rules had become too strict. Some older residents said the town was changing too fast, but most people believed it was changing in the right way. One day, Tanya received a message from a young girl named Maya. She was only 13 and lived in another state, but she had seen the video of what happened. She wrote, "Dear Mrs. Whitmore, I saw your story online. I used to be scared of cops, but after watching you stand up for yourself, I realized I don't have to be afraid to speak up if something's wrong." Tanya read the letter twice. Then she smiled. That's why she kept going. For girls like Maya, for boys who might one day be stopped by a cop, for families who just wanted to feel safe. The town also began to heal in small ways. A group of local barbers and stylists volunteered to give free haircuts to people who had been mistreated or unfairly judged. They called it the Dignity Day Project. It wasn't about fixing mistakes. It was about showing care. At the police station, things looked different now. Officers wore body cameras. Training sessions were longer. New hires had to pass extra tests on ethics and public trust. Some officers said it was more work. Others said it was worth it. A younger officer, named Daniel Reyes, stood out. He often spoke up during training. He asked questions. He led discussions on how to treat people fairly. One day, he told his fellow officers, "We're here to protect people, all people. If we forget that, then we're not doing our job." He became a leader in the department. People listened to him. Back at home, Tanya and James sat together on their porch one evening. The sky was clear. Fireflies blinked in the yard. They didn't talk much, just enjoyed the quiet. After a while, James said softly, "Do you think it'll last?" Tanya looked at him. "What do you mean?" "The changes," he said. "Do you think they'll stick around? Or will things go back to the way they were?" She thought for a moment. "Change doesn't happen all at once," she said. "It starts with one person, then another, and another. We planted seeds, James. Now we wait to see them grow." He nodded. "You're stronger than I am." She laughed gently. "No, I'm just tired of being silent." They both smiled. That night, the town slept peacefully. There were no protests, no arguments, just calm. And somewhere, far away, a man named Marcus Daly packed a box in a small apartment. He was leaving Brooksville behind. He had taken a job at a warehouse under a new name. His badge was gone. His past was heavy, but as he closed the box, he paused. He looked at a newspaper clipping inside, the one that showed Tanya speaking at the town square. He didn't throw it away. Instead, he folded it carefully and placed it in the box with the rest of his things, because deep down he knew she had done something brave. And maybe, just maybe, he could learn from it. Back in Brooksville, life went on. Kids played in the park, teachers taught lessons, police officers walked the streets with new rules and new hearts, and the town remembered, not just the mistake, but the movement it created, and the woman who helped start it all. Tanya Whitmore, the mayor's wife, the voice for the unheard, the woman who, even after losing her hair, found her strength and never let go.